Welcome, 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 everybody. Thank you for joining tonight's live webinar, How Chapter 7 Bankruptcy Can Help You Take Control of Your Debt. I'm Ben Jackson. I'm one of the co-founders of the nonprofit Upsolve. And tonight on this webinar, my guess is if you're here, you're probably dealing with overwhelming debt of some kind. Maybe you have credit cards, maybe you have medical bills, student loans, and if that's the case, you're probably wondering if there's a way forward. The good news is there is hope if you're struggling with debt. And honestly, you're not alone. There are millions of people in the US who struggle with debt, and there are millions of people who have gotten out of debt through bankruptcy, including myself. And it gave me the fresh start that I needed to get back to the American dream. So 9 years ago, I had a small business that failed. And I think it's a pretty common story in this economy. I was buried under $60,000 of credit card debt, and I was only earning $20,000 a year driving for Uber and Lyft. And because of that, I ended up on food stamps. And I felt a really deep sense of shame. Filing for bankruptcy completely changed my life, though. It gave me a second chance, which eventually led me to law school. And it even inspired me to co-found the nonprofit Upsolve to help other people take control of their financial future, just like I was able to do. Because bankruptcy didn't destroy my life. It gave me a second chance. And the fact that this option is hidden from so many people, or so many people don't understand it, I think is honestly a national crisis. And so it's my really unique privilege and passion in life to help other people take advantage of this tool. So tonight we have one simple goal: to give you a little bit of clarity, confidence, and actionable insight on whether bankruptcy could be the right thing for you. And if it is, we're going to talk a little bit about how you can go about filing. So we're going to cover the following tonight. Stick around through the whole session to hear all of it. First of all, we're going to talk about how to know if you qualify for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Second, we're going to talk about what happens with student loans in a Chapter 7 filing. Third, we're going to talk about how to file without an attorney and save yourself thousands of dollars. We're going to talk about what filing means for your credit score, short-term and long-term, because that's a question that a lot of people have. We're going to talk about some common mistakes that people make that could hurt their case. And then finally, we're going to review how Upsolve's free platform makes the entire bankruptcy process easier. And remember, this is a live session, so please drop your questions in the chat anytime, and we will answer them as we go. All right, that is enough out of me. I want to introduce you all to today's guest, Claire Robinson, who is Upsolve's Director of Bankruptcy. Let me get my face out of the way so you all can see her instead. And Claire, to kick us off tonight, what is bankruptcy and what is Upsolve and how do the two connect?
Yeah, thanks so much, Ben, and so grateful to be here. Before I answer that question, I want to tell a little bit about my journey to Upsolve. So unlike Ben, I didn't file Chapter 7 bankruptcy, but I had an unexpected medical emergency. Overnight, I went from having an income and a stable life to having that all ripped out from under me. That experience, along with the experience of helping thousands of people in similarly financially distressed situations like I was, led me to Upsolve. And I am so proud and honored to run our bankruptcy product that helps people get a fresh start. So what is bankruptcy and what is Upsolve? Upsolve is a nonprofit technology service that helps people file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Chapter 7 bankruptcy is a financial reset button for people who genuinely can't afford to pay their debts. You file some forms with the courts reviews those forms, and if you're successful, which the vast majority of people are, you will have most of your debts wiped out and you'll have a clean slate for your financial future.
Sounds pretty good. Clean slate's good. How does doing this process typically work? Is this something where you need a lawyer? Is it something you can do on your own?
So the process of filing for bankruptcy is actually relatively simple in many ways. It's just obscured by a lot of bureaucratic and legal red tape, which makes it difficult for most people to navigate on their own if they're not familiar with it. So the process of filing for Chapter 7 bankruptcy is that you fill out a number of forms about your personal and financial information that the bankruptcy court will use to determine if you're eligible for what's called a bankruptcy discharge, which is that wiping out of your debts. For most people, they qualify with very simple criteria, and the process is really just as complex as the amount of time it takes you to list all of your information. but the forms are written with a lot of jargon and can be difficult to navigate. That's where Upsolve comes into play. We help simplify the process so that you don't have to worry about legal terms or figuring out exactly which form you need to file. We help you file on your own.
Okay. So it's a process, bankruptcy, to get out of debt, get a fresh start. Upsolve helps facilitate that process, make it a little bit easier. Got it. How do I decide if bankruptcy is right for me? Like, who does it typically tend to work for? Who does it tend to not work for? And how would you go about making that decision?
Yeah, great question. So, generally, Chapter 7 bankruptcy is for people who genuinely can't repay their debts. That
Mm,
first question is a great place to start. If repaying your debt every month is keeping you from paying other necessities like
mm,
rent or food, if you are getting constant calls from debt collectors, if you're struggling to figure out where your monthly minimums are going to come from. Those are all good
mm,
signs that Chapter 7 bankruptcy might be a good fit for you. Everyone's circumstances are different, but I would say that for most people that we see who are using Upsolve, the biggest mistake that they made is not filing when they shouldn't have, but waiting too long to
mm,
file, and it ended up impacting other aspects. Their debt ended up impacting other aspects of their life, like their housing or their career.
mm,
Um, so you might be surprised. Many people in the United States are a good fit for bankruptcy, but because the process maybe seems scary,
mm,
because of the emotional fear and shame that so many of us experience when we're going through debt, um, most people who could and should file do not.
mm. So I remember when I was thinking about bankruptcy, there's this game that I kind of played with myself, right? Which was like, oh, I don't need to do this right now. Like it'll get a little bit better. Let me just work a little bit harder, a little bit longer, or wait until after, XYZ thing happens. And I kind of just kept kicking the can down the road. And when I finally filed, I thought, holy crap, why didn't I do this sooner? And I've talked to many people who filed bankruptcy who have a similar experience. And so I'm curious, like, when is the right time to file bankruptcy? What do you think, and what do you see to work best for users that you've worked with?
So it's a personal decision. One thing
Mm,
that's important to know is that there are restrictions on how often you can file for
okay.
bankruptcy. If you're filing two Chapter 7, so a Chapter 7 and then later down the road another Chapter 7, that waiting period is 8 years.
Okay.
Um, Sometimes that scares people away and they think I should kind of hold out to file. But for most people, what we see is that once your debt gets to a point where it is mathematically challenging
Mm,
to repay it, that's the right time to file for bankruptcy. When I say mathematically challenging, that doesn't mean mathematically impossible.
mm,
Sure, you could work 4 jobs and
yeah.
90 hours a week and find a way to sleep on a friend's couch and be able to pay all your debt back.
Yeah.
That's not realistic. And this is a legal tool that is your right to
Yeah.
use. It's not something you have to earn or that you have to prove you've tried every other option before
Mm.
bankruptcy. It's a legal right that you have available to you when you decide that it's best to use.
Yeah, I remember sitting down and saying, "Okay, here's how much I'm making. Like, and let's even be generous. Let's, round it up by like 50%. Here's how much I'm making. Here's how much I can pay towards my debt. How long will it take me to pay this off?" And like kind of realizing like, "Oh, even if I can afford this, this is going to take so long. Like the gap between me and the life that I want to have is just insurmountable at this point." I think, do you have any tips for people on kind of how to do that math? Because I know it can be really tricky when you're struggling financially to like face those facts. Is there anything you've seen to work well for people, or that like you use in your own budgeting in your life that could kind of help people with that process?
Yeah, I would say that what helps people make that decision is so personal, but
Mm,
I can share what I do in my own financial life to figure out what I can afford and what I can't afford. With bills that I need to pay, I calculate out with the minimums. How long is it going to take me to pay that off? And then if I was contributing the most that I possibly could, how long would it take? And what important things would I need to sacrifice in order to spend that much? Does that mean no gym membership? Does that mean no taking my little brother to dinner for his college graduation? I really encourage people to think about this process as not just a financial and legal process, but also an emotional process. You deserve to have a good life. You deserve to have your finances contribute to your ability to live your best life. And if you qualify for Chapter 7 and repaying your debt is keeping you from living the life that you want to live for yourself and your family, it may be that it's not only a possible financial option for you, but it's actually the most responsible thing that you can do for yourself and for those around you.
So that definitely, like, this idea of where do I want to be? Can I get there? What's in my way? Like, that makes a lot of sense to me. But like, what do I do when what's in my way is emotional? When it's, I'm ashamed of this debt. I'm ashamed of filing bankruptcy. I've heard that means, I'm irresponsible, yada, yada. Like, how should I think about those things?
Yeah. The first thing to remember is that you're not alone. Millions and millions and millions of people are in these same situations. It is not a personal failing. It is a failing of the system that we currently live in that allows people to fall into insurmountable debt with no realistic pathway other than bankruptcy to re-enter the middle class and be able to pay for the basic necessities of their life. So the first thing is you are not alone. The second thing to consider is that you have other important moral, financial, and emotional responsibilities other than just repaying your debt.
Yeah.
The $2,000 credit card bill that you have to JP Morgan Chase is nothing to them, but it is everything to your kid who wants a toy for their birthday or the friend who needs help when they're in a challenging time. So I really encourage people to think more broadly about what their financial responsibilities are. It's really common to think, I signed up for this debt, I must pay it back. But ask yourself, what other commitments do you have in your life and what money would help you do to live that life that you really want to?
So there's this great old line that I think is like probably unnecessarily disparaging, but so true that, right, like stupidity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And I think what I ended up doing when I was struggling with debt was I kept trying to work harder and saying like, well, maybe if I just work a little bit harder, maybe if I just work a little bit harder. And I thought that was like the upright, just, responsible thing to do. And in reality, like for me, it was just stupidity. Like it was just continuing to do this over and over. And like, there's no heroism. There's no honor in like stupidity and like your actions. Like it's worth sometimes taking a risk and stepping out and doing something different. So you can put yourself on a path towards being able to be able to support those around you and, able to take care of those other responsibilities, as you mentioned. We have a question here from Rita. Let's see what it says here. I used Upsolve to file my bankruptcy. Everything went really well. I had my 341 meeting on 5/13, so now just waiting on the discharge letter. When is a good time to try to reestablish my credit? So bankruptcy is in process, not discharged yet. We need to start rebuilding. What do you think, Claire?
Yeah. First of all, Rita, congratulations.
Yeah, congrats.
You absolutely did the hardest part at this point. And so excited for you. So excited for when you get that final discharge letter. What is going to happen with your credit score after filing bankruptcy will depend a bit on what your credit score was before you filed. For most Upsolve users who have fairly poor credit going into the bankruptcy process, somewhere around a 500 credit score, bankruptcy is ultimately going to actually significantly improve their credit score. Sometimes what will happen is that after you file, you'll see your credit score go down. And then in the maybe 3 to 6 months after you file, it'll start to creep its way back up. There are a few things that you can do to help that process along. One is getting something called a credit builder loan, which is sort of like a savings program that goes on your credit score. It helps you build up credit with money that you already have. So you're not actually incurring debt, but you are getting a positive credit history on your record. Secured credit cards work in a similar way. There's a few other options as well. But Ben, I'd be curious, what helped you rebuild your credit score?
Yeah. So one thing that you can do is rent reporting, because this has almost nothing to do with your credit worthiness, right? Like maybe you needed a credit check to get the apartment in the first place, but it's not an ongoing thing. A lot of people don't realize you can report rent and oftentimes other utilities that you pay to the credit bureaus, because that is a regular on-time payment, right? Like that's what they want to see to assess credit worthiness. And it's pretty easy to do. There's online tutorials. I think we have one on our upsolve.org website as well. But basically, you're just saying on a monthly basis, I paid this rent, I paid it again, I paid it again. There's some tools that can automate that, and that will help boost your credit as well. And there are also some secured credit cards that you can get while your bankruptcy case is pending. Something like Credit Karma, great resource to go to, do like the free screening, see what credit cards you might be eligible for. And those secured cards, as Claire mentioned, those are cards where there's like a money amount that you set aside as security for the credit line that you get. So it's kind of like you're borrowing money from yourself to pay, and those boost your credit as well. Claire's earlier point, though, like my credit went up shortly after I filed bankruptcy because you're getting rid of bad debt. So it happens pretty quickly afterwards. Thanks for the question, Rita. I really, really appreciate it and wish you all the best. And if anybody else that's listening has questions, throw them in the chat. We are more than happy to answer them. Okay. So we talked about a little bit of post bankruptcy. How do I rebuild my credit? What, Claire, do you see people most often get wrong or struggle with when they're working on a bankruptcy application?
The thing that is most common to struggle with, although it's still fairly rare to get it wrong, is that there's a lot of information that the bankruptcy forms will ask you. And so gathering up all of that information and making sure that everything on your forms is complete, up to date, and accurate can be a time consuming and frustrating process. For a lot of people filing for bankruptcy, one of the most challenging parts is listing everyone that they owe money to. You may have, if you're like me, y'all can't see my desk, which is a good thing, but I have just stacks of papers. So if you're anything like me, you probably have stacks of old bills, letters you've gotten in the mail, notices from debt collectors. Going through all of that and making sure that everyone that you owe money to is listed on the forms can be time consuming and tedious. It's also important to help you have a successful filing. But one thing that a lot of people don't know as they're going through this process for the first time and starting to learn about bankruptcy is that it's okay to make mistakes. You can file what's called an amendment on your bankruptcy forms, which is just an update to the forms that say you left something off or something wasn't quite right. That is totally okay to do, and it won't impact your ability to get a successful bankruptcy discharge. So you should put your foot forward, but you also shouldn't be afraid if one thing goes wrong, it'll be okay.
Yeah. When people think about, like, I know for sure when I thought about court, I'm like, this is like my one shot at this. Like, this is like a judge in a powdered wig with a gavel who's like, ugh, you go to prison for life for getting this wrong. And like, it's very much not like that at all. Like, I went in with the wrong forms for the wrong state, and like, it was just a disaster. And the clerks were so nice. They were like, oh, actually, like, do this form instead, or like, it's okay. Like, we'll fill this thing out. And that was just the first time that I messed it up. Like I also messed up my reaffirmation when I was trying to get my car post bankruptcy. So you can definitely make mistakes. Like I am proof positive of that. So I really, really appreciate that, Claire.
Yeah. And one thing I'll say,
no,
Ben, is that We have a former bankruptcy court clerk on our staff at Upsolve. If you email us, she's Melissa. She's absolutely fantastic. But these are people that have chosen a career in public service because they want to help people like you. A lot of people walk into these court buildings and they expect that it is buttoned up and high standards and really scary. The truth is that everyone in that building has chosen that as their job because they want to help people. So don't be afraid. There's certain things they can and can't help with. They all want to be a resource to you.
Yeah, well said. Okay, so we've gotten some questions that have been sent in from the audience, some coming over from Instagram. So let me pull these up and we'll run through them. Okay, so what happens to wage garnishments or collection calls after I file?
This is a fantastic question. So when you file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, something goes into effect right when you file, which is called the automatic stay. What the automatic stay says is this person is in the process of filing for bankruptcy, and so we're going to stop all collection activity on their debts while we process the bankruptcy and make a determination about whether or not they will get their bankruptcy discharge. So what that means for collection calls is that once you file and you get the benefits of the automatic stay, debt collectors are not supposed to contact you. That's what's supposed to happen in practice. That doesn't always happen. We have an article that explains this in detail, what you should do if a collector continues to contact you after you've filed. But the short answer there is let them know that you filed and let them know that you're receiving the benefits of that automatic stay.
So what if it's a lawsuit? Like what if there's an actual debt lawsuit and it's not something where it's just a collector contacting me? Like what happens to that collection process then?
So if there is a lawsuit ongoing, you will let the other party in the lawsuit know that you have filed for bankruptcy. That process will not continue until the bankruptcy case is resolved. One thing that people often forget in this process is that you do have to let everyone know. Your creditors will get a notice in the mail that you filed, but they don't always immediately act upon that. So letting the opposing parties or your creditors know that you filed is a helpful step to ensure that everything goes smoothly.
Is there like typically a process for that? Like, is there like a form that I fill out? Do I call them? Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like every time you call a creditor, it's like 400,000 different menu options and none of them make any sense. Like, how do people typically do this?
So you certainly can call them, and many people do, but as part of the bankruptcy filing process, there is a notice that you will send to those creditors that will also let them know that you filed.
Okay, got it. Oh, I love this one. Anytime to talk about things being free is good with me. So what does it actually cost to file? And can I actually do it for free with Upsolve? How is that possible?
Yeah, this is a great question. I love answering this question because it's something I'm really proud of, which is that as a nonprofit, generously supported by donors like the Gates Foundation, Upsolve is able to offer our software completely free of charge. So we will never bill you for anything associated with filing for bankruptcy with Upsolve. There are fees associated with filing. The two important ones to note is that there are required financial education courses that you'll take as part of the bankruptcy process. If you don't qualify for a fee waiver with those financial education providers, they're like $15 to $20 to take those classes. And then there is a court filing fee as well, which is $338. Most people who use Upsolve qualify for the fee waiver. But if you don't qualify, that is one cost that would be associated with your filing.
So another plug for using Upsolve. I had no idea fee waiver was a thing when I filed. Like I did not have the money. I like worked extra shifts at Uber to get the money to pay this thing. And I wish that I hadn't, because I definitely would have qualified for a fee waiver. So save yourself that roughly $400 and see if you qualify for a fee waiver. Our tool will help with that. All right. Another question. Actually, I've never had this question before. This is an interesting one. So will my name be made public if I file bankruptcy?
This is a great question. When you file documents with the bankruptcy court, just like with any court, those records are public. There are certain aspects of your filing that are anonymized. For example, your social security number is asked for on the forms. It is not going to be made public. That said, it is very uncommon that people are just refreshing the bankruptcy court website to see if someone has filed. So technically, yes, the filings are public, but this isn't something that is likely to have negative repercussions. It really, what I wonder if is underneath this question is, how will this impact my job? How will this impact other aspects of my life?
Yeah, things like that.
We have specific articles on each of these things. I really encourage reading those, but broadly, bankruptcy is not as scary as the creditors want you to think it is. It is not likely to lose your job as a result of filing for bankruptcy. If you're up to date on your rent, it is not likely for you to lose your apartment as a result of filing for bankruptcy. A lot of these fears that you may hear don't benefit you and do benefit the people who paid those.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like, where's the information you're hearing coming from? So this one, I can't copy it for some reason, so I'm just going to ask it. I've heard this question actually a lot recently, so I'm curious to hear your perspective on this, Claire. Let's say that I am struggling to make payments, right? Like I've been late on a few things, I've paid a few things. If I'm pretty convinced that I'm going to file bankruptcy, should I stop paying my credit cards? Like, maybe I have one that has like a really high interest rate, and so I want to pay that one but not the other ones. Like, what's best practices in this instance?
Yeah, this is a really good question. And you're right, it is a common question. One thing to know here is that it's not a requirement to file bankruptcy that you stop making payments on your debts. That's a really common misconception we see is, can I file bankruptcy even though I still have been paying on my debts? That's not required. One thing to know, though, is in the months before you file for bankruptcy, if you're paying a disproportionate amount to one creditor, let's say you're not paying on any of your credit cards, but you are paying on past due rent, that may be considered something called a preferential payment, which is essentially not treating all of the people that you owe money equally. What may happen in that circumstance is that the court will redistribute that money more fairly amongst all of your creditors. So that can be something to consider as you're determining the timing for when you file. The devil is in the details here, but for most upsolvers, they're not paying on their debts in the few months before they file for bankruptcy.
Yeah. I will say, like, nothing, with the exception of repossession on cars, nothing bad is going to happen if you stop paying and you file bankruptcy. Like, it's not like if you pay one and pay the other, something worse happens, or vice versa. To Claire's point, it's just a matter of like, what can I afford to do right now? Like, am I ready to file, and then just let the process kind of take over from there. So don't worry too much about trying to manage it yourself. If you've decided bankruptcy is right for you, jump into that and assume that that's your path forward from there. Last question here from White Turtle. Am I supposed to list all my bank accounts, PayPal, Venmo, etc., in assets, even if there's $0 in them?
This is a good question. Most Upsolvers will list all of the financial accounts that they have, even if there are $0 in them. That is essentially just for nice, clean housekeeping. But I tend to find that it makes it easier on the bankruptcy trustees who are overseeing the case to know what accounts are open, even if those accounts don't have assets currently.
Yeah, so we haven't talked about the 341 meeting really on these webinars, which I forgot to mention this earlier. We do these every Monday night. So if you have future questions, like come back, check them out. We do them live. But one thing we haven't really covered in the past is what you actually talk to the trustee about at the 341 meeting. And so from like personal experience, I can tell you the trustee asked me if I had any other accounts or assets that I hadn't included in my documents. And it's fine if there's $0 in them, right? Like the trustee's goal is to figure out if you have money. But the best thing to do to make that conversation go as smoothly as possible is to just say everything. It doesn't take you any really extra time to say like, here's my $0 Venmo or something like that. And then you can truthfully answer that question. No, no hassle, no fuss. Like you're able to just move forward with that thing. So always best to over disclose on these things. Now, I will say, as a general principle, it's best to over disclose. But if you're somebody who has significant assets and there's something that you could potentially lose in the bankruptcy, then I would suggest talk to a lawyer, figure out what the best strategy of talking about that property on the bankruptcy filing is, because you may be able to protect it with exemptions and things. Claire, is there anything that you want to share with the audience tonight before we wrap up?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. And it's been so great being here. Really grateful for the opportunity. I want to close by saying that this process can feel really intimidating and feel scary when you first get started. But almost universally, what we hear from our Upsolve users when they're done with the process is they're glad they filed. The process was so much easier than they expected, and that they wish they'd done it sooner. We hear just incredible stories about what that fresh start has meant. People who are able to go to Starbucks and not question the $4.50 on a latte for their birthday, or just to be able to go to bed at night without do not disturb on their phone because they're not worried about those calls coming in.
Yeah.
So these questions that everyone has are so good and so important. And this is a big decision. I also want you to know that on the other side of this decision, it is almost universal that this is a much easier and much more simple process than people expected.
I love that. Well, thank you, Claire. It's such a pleasure having you here. Thanks to everybody that joined us tonight. If you found this webinar helpful, please share it with a friend or family member you think might benefit. If you have more questions, you can always join us for a future webinar. Send them in the comments. We can respond to them thereafter, or shoot us an email. Is there actually, I'm blanking on our email now, Claire. Is it support@upsolve.org or is it help@upsolve.org these days?
People can actually email either, and they will both redirect to the right inbox. You can also click contact us on our website. And if you create an Upsolve account, you can play around with our AI tool, which is heck of a lot better at answering many of these questions than I am. So encourage you to try that as well.
Super easy to use. And I didn't give Claire the kudos for this earlier, but in addition to being our director of bankruptcy, meaning she helps answer these questions and get people through, she's also responsible for a lot of this tool now. So you have her to thank for how easy it is to use. So thanks again, everybody. Wish you all the clarity and confidence in getting out of debt, if that's through bankruptcy or otherwise. And remember, you're not alone. There's definitely hope on the other side. Take care, and we'll see you again soon.